Hi there, everybody. My name is Erica Brown. I'm the editor of the Manchester Cricket, and welcome to the 2025 Meet the Candidates Forum for our election this year. We have a very busy election this year, this season, in Manchester especially. We have 3 contested races, and whenever we have a contested race, the newspaper provides a platform for in every way possible for the candidates to introduce themselves to our voters and our residents. So today we have the library trustee, 2 candidates for library trustee. We have Sarah Dunn Davis. She is the incumbent. We have Leslie Beatty. She is the challenger. So we're going to talk libraries today. So let's go ahead and get started. I'd like to get started by, and also, by the way, I'd like to just say quickly thank you to 1623 Studios. They're a real gem for us. They're our public television access station, and they perform an incredible service for us. So thank you for that. And then also thank you to the Manchester Essex Regional School District for allowing us to use this beautiful auditorium. Okay, so now let's really get started. I'd like to get started by just asking the candidates to introduce themselves. We're going to start in alphabetical order, and then when we go through the questions, we're going to sort of toggle back and forth. Our practice, by the way, is to give the questions to the candidates ahead of time. That way they are prepared. And also because this is being taped by 1623 Studios, it's going to be aired on their channels and on their YouTube channel, and then also on the Cricket's website. So we want people who see this afterwards to get a lot out of it. So that's why we ask our candidates to be prepared. So let's get started alphabetically. Leslie Beatty, would you please introduce yourself and share with us why you're running and what you hope to accomplish if you're elected successfully?
All of that. Can everybody hear me? I just didn't know quite how loud I needed to project into this. So I'm Leslie Beatty. I have lived in Manchester full-time, and I say that because I'll come back to that. But I've been in Manchester full-time about 10 years. Before that, I was in Dallas for 36 years, and happily I was able to escape that. But even before that, I spent my formative years in Boxford, so I'm very happy to be back in New England, specifically on the North Shore, and more importantly, on Cape Ann. I had spent my early years in South America, and then before living here full-time, we would just come up from Dallas during the summers because I was a middle school librarian at a private school in Dallas, which really was not anything I was thinking about doing yet. I was there for 15 years and grew to love it. When I decided to study library science, if you will, it was after our 3 children were in school full-time and decided I didn't want to be a PTA mother, or rather didn't want to be only a PTA mother. And so would end up driving myself at night or in the afternoons, in mornings, whatever, to the University of North Texas, about an hour away from where we lived. So earning my degree, I ended up, of all things, doing research for both kind of a recruiting firm as well as McKinsey, doing an internship with them. And then I found myself deciding, no, I didn't want to do that full-time, and ended up writing for a local paper, and then finding myself back in the library world again. So why am I running? I'd like to think that the library trustee board needs all kinds of talents. And at the same time, just like you would think and hope that an art museum would need a professional art curator or historian, I would think that a library trustee board would also need a professional librarian on it. So that's one reason. What do I hope to accomplish as a library trustee, should I win? I would hope to make the library trustee board more inclusive, which means that I would hope that being able to expand the board would make it so, bringing more talent to the board, putting less pressure on the 3 members of the current board, and yet whoever, say that if I were to win, I would hope to invite Sarah back on the board as another member once the expansion of a board would be accomplished. I think that's all I want to say right now.
That's wonderful. Okay, Sarah Dunn Davis, hello, welcome.
Hi.
Please introduce yourself and why you're running and what impact you think that you would bring if you were successfully elected.
Okay. Hi, I'm Sarah Davis. I'm currently a library trustee. I've been on the board since 2023. I filled a vacancy, so I was appointed by the select board first, and then I ran for re-election last year. And then because my seat had only 1 year left on the term, I get to run again this year. I have lived in Manchester for several years. I lived in Beverly Farms before that, and before that Boston, before that New York City. But I have a family. I have a daughter at Memorial in 2nd grade. My son will be in kindergarten, just went to his orientation today. In the fall, professionally, I'm an attorney at Ropes & Gray in Boston. I have split my career between private practice and in-house. So before being at Ropes, I was at a public company, actually in Beverly, AMG, a global asset management company. When I left, I was a vice president and senior counsel. Before that, I was in private practice in New York. And then before that, I was a law clerk on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 6th Circuit in Kentucky. So that's my professional background. And why I'm running is, I think we have done a lot of great work. I have my other 2 trustees here in the audience. And since, at least I've been involved in 2023, we've really drilled down on what we see as being big issues for the library, a lot of which have to do with making sure the library has the right resources financially to allow it to, at first, be maintained where it is, in terms of library services, in terms of the building, and then ideally grown in terms of services and the building through renovation or expansion. And so I think many of your library supporters and are aware that we applied for a state grant last year. Unfortunately, we were not awarded it, but I think that effort was still valuable. I went back and looked. Most years, the library trustees meet once a month, except for August, and so that's 11 meetings. But we met 19 times in 2024, looking back on it, and we did solicit a lot of input from the community, because I was actually part of the grant process, and learned what the community expects from library services, what they would like to see in terms of an expansion. And the way that process worked was a little bit unusual, because it was supposed to be site neutral. It wasn't about, oh, do you want, I don't know, an archive room, or it wasn't even supposed to be tied to whether or not you want the current site or somewhere else, even though it's pretty clear in Manchester, everybody wants the current site. But it was a really good opportunity to hear about what people loved about the library, which was a lot, and mainly the amazing staff, the programming, but also what people want to see in the library that's lacking. And a big part of that is, as I mentioned, the building. And I think at the beginning, the first thing, and we're addressing it this year, is accessibility, ADA compliance. If you've obviously probably all been in the building and seen the bathroom, for example, that's the first order of business. Where a town meeting approved $70,000 for initial design work for that. But there are other issues. If you want to get to the 2nd floor, it's not accessible if you're in a wheelchair or have any kind of mobility issues, things like that. So there's accessibility and there's just maintenance and repair that we have to deal with. And I know that this doesn't sound like the most glamorous aspect of a library, but we do spend a lot of time on it. It is a big part of our job. And looking forward, and I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about this, but towards enhancing what we have and growing it and expanding the building. Those are, I think, what we've been focused on in the last year and a half, and what I would hope to continue if reelected.
That's awesome. You guys are really good with time. I have to say that's wonderful. Thank you. We're right on time. You've brought up a lot of topics that we're going to actually touch on, so that's a really incredible introduction and a good segue to our prepared questions, which we're going to start now. We have 3 questions, but they're 3 questions that drill into a lot of different areas. The first one has to do with financing. It has to do with grants and funding. We live in a time right now that particularly this year, where funding is precarious, especially for nonprofits and for community-oriented things like a library and a community resource. So the question is, with recent cuts in federal funding for libraries and museums, creative thinking is required to maintain and grow library services. How would you approach financial stewardship and fundraising to support the library's mission? Leslie, we'll go back to you.
So what Sarah touched on in terms of what the library, I guess, physical needs as well as technological needs and whatever, has to do with how do we accomplish that? And as you would predict, there'll be fundraising, but I think the fundraising has to happen in a way that doesn't conflict with other fundraising that's already being planned. For instance, the senior center. Mind you, the senior center is trying to raise $3 million in about a year and a half. The library will be trying to raise $10 million in order to expand the children's area. I would hope would also increase a community room or create a community room where lots of different organizations and clubs would be able to meet. But in the technological way, I think there's a lot that can happen in as well as outside of the library for the staff, as Sarah mentioned, that are incredible, to take themselves and some of the iPads that the library has and do all sorts of programs with them, maybe as a tutoring or learning part of outreach. I think the financial stewardship currently is probably something that can't be improved right now in the way that the library budget is set up. It's both the town and the state funded beautifully, and our staff is well paid. The books that they choose and I think are well rounded, and I think that we have a wonderful Friends of the Library group that helps with all the different missing pieces that the budget doesn't cover. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you. And I know that was a disappointment that the library did not get that grant. And I think, my impression from my standpoint, which is hardly, on the inside, but is that Manchester was already challenged to get a grant like that because of the nature of our community and the profile of our community. And even now, in today's environment, it's going to be even harder. So, Sarah, same question?
Sure. So when I think of financial challenges, I sort of think of it on the town level, the state level, the federal level. In town, obviously, as Leslie said, we have a good situation with our operating budget and our capital requests, but as we all know, there are a lot of needs in the town now, and there are only going to be more needs as we lose grants and such, as we're seeing. So I do think a big part of being a trustee is being a strong advocate before the FinCom, before the select board, making sure that obviously they're looking at the bigger picture, that they understand what's going on underlying. I mean, the operating budget is usually a little bit less exciting, but certainly capital requests with a building that is 138 years old, as you can imagine, that is the trickier part. And one thing that we did last year as trustees was that we commissioned a conditions assessment, because the request was made to the library board to be more long-term in our requests for planning. You know, this is sort of an easy example, but if you're going to do the ADA design work this year and then construction is the next year and things like that, but also, you know, what are the other more pressing issues? Is it the roof? Is it the flooding in the basement? So the conditions assessment was extremely helpful to have a third party come in and work with us and the town engineer to help us come up with a responsible 5-year plan, which I have no doubt will evolve, because one of the challenges is a lot of the repair and maintenance ends up being unexpected. I think some of you know part of the ceiling fell down within the past year from damp, from rain, and we've had bats and bees and squirrels and things. Those are not that expensive to get rid of, but the things that crop up are not expected, and so that's hard to deal with, hard to plan for.
Well, couldn't we incorporate some of that into
a
children's
program? Yeah. So I think we're in a good place on the town level, but I think as with any other institution in town, you have to advocate, because there's a lot of need chasing a limited amount of dollars. On the state level, I think the grant was a good example where the grants like that are becoming more focused on economic need. The construction grant we applied for, this round that we applied for was the first time it was competitive. In past years, you just filled out the form, and if you checked all the right boxes, you were accepted, and then they just kind of went on. There was the first, they went down a list, there was a wait list. So this was the first year that it was competitive. We still threw our name in the hat, went through a very labor-intensive process, and we did know that part of it was going to be, they were looking at the median income of the town, and our need factor in that regard was not extremely high, and that was a part of it in terms of the feedback, although there were other areas that were part of that decision from what we understand. But so I think that's one of the challenges at the state level. And then, of course, the federal level, the current administration essentially defunded IMLS, which is the resource for, I don't know what the number is, maybe close to $300 million worth of grants across the country. And I think Massachusetts gets about 3.5. We don't directly participate in those grants, but there will be impacts. Of course, like everything else, that executive order is being litigated, but the point is Trump fired all of the employees, so there's very little going on at IMLS. And IMLS funds the MBLC, the Massachusetts Board of Library Commissioners, and we have certain resources that we get from our MBLC, so there's some sort of knock-on effects that are already occurring by the diminishing federal funds, including the platform we use for ebooks. So you might think, oh, the library, I don't really remember that getting federal funds, and on some level that's right, but it does sort of trickle down. So I think those are the big financial challenges, and as I mentioned, I think being a strong advocate is something that's important that I found as a trustee. I think, I am a corporate lawyer and do more negotiation than appearing before judges, but I do think that has been a good skill set to have, and also just to navigate everything that is going on, trying to understand how all of this fits together. And and it's an evolving situation. We go to a library board meeting and we think we have an agenda. I mean, of course we have an agenda, and then it's like something comes out in the news a couple of days before, and it's like, okay, I guess this is going under business not anticipated by the chair. Number one, what's going on? So I think there are a lot of challenges sort of across the board, and that is where private fundraising comes in. Obviously, a challenging time period in terms of asking people for money with all the uncertainty in the economy and competing priorities in town with the senior center. But I also feel like the library hasn't run a capital campaign in a very long time, and if we keep waiting, it's just not going to happen. So we do have some momentum from the grant that I think we can capitalize on, and a lot of good community feedback from that process. And so I am in favor of launching a capital campaign now. I am the board member that was designated to lead that effort, and it's been pretty early days with the timing and the grant and all that. But that is my view on the capital campaign.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Our next question has to do with technology, and I know that the library trustees are responsible for setting policy and overseeing the budget, et cetera. So it's a higher level. So this might seem like it's a more tactical question, but it's important because most people think that libraries technology is disrupting libraries and the health of libraries. And that's not necessarily the case at all. And especially, and I don't need to say that to either one of you. But I would like to ask the question, libraries are evolving, and they're evolving in very exciting and interesting ways because of technology, and they're embracing it. So I'd love to say, how has the library sort of engaged technology? How does it see it? And how does it, how are you rising to the challenges of adopting technology, and what role do you see in it? That was a very long question, I'm sorry. Leslie, take it away, please.
So trying to imagine what libraries and technology are going to do with each other, to each other, maybe even 5 or 10 years from now is kind of hard for me to imagine because so much has happened so quickly. Having computers in the kids' room and hopefully moving from the computers to iPads to yet maybe another kind of keyboard that brings books alive to the kids, or that they can follow along as the children's librarian is reading to them, where they're already learning reading skills. But I'm also thinking not just of technology and how much more it can offer, not just to children, but again, as I mentioned, maybe bring technology to people who are scared of it right now, who did not grow up with it, maybe in Sarah's children's age where it was just there. And but I'm thinking also of how the library can evolve in a physical way. And I'm having been a middle school librarian and having raised 3 children, I'm definitely on the children's reading area side, and to enlarge that or to move it to a greater space that gets more light, that brings more excitement, has more color. I think all that can be managed with an addition of space, and I know that that's been talked about. How we can work that out, it will hopefully be up to a designer rather than more of a stopgap measure. But I see a lot of growth happening. I see that that there still will be need for meeting areas and also student work areas and things like that. So I don't think it's all going to be technological. I think it's going to be how do we work with the space and expand it in such a way that we can look down the road in 10 years and say, we did a lot.
Thank you, Leslie. Sarah?
Sure. I think part of the reason your question was long because technology is, it's even like how do you define it these days? I think, just trying to break it down between kind of like hardware and tech education and what people do from their homes with e-readers. I think as far as hardware goes, the reality is most people in Manchester do have their own computers, and so we don't see a lot of use of the main. I mean, people are in there, but it's not my sense that we actually need any more computers, having observed and speaking to our library director about that. People do use the Wi-Fi. I have my 2024 year in review, which says there were about 5,000 Wi-Fi sessions in 2024. plenty of people go in there to print because they don't have printers anymore. So as far as the kind of like the hardware technology, I think all that is fine. And the e-reading aspect of it is huge. Back to my year in review, we had about 66,000 items borrowed in 2024, and that was about 80 physical, 20 electronic materials, and that ebook circulation has increased 92% in the past 4 years. So we can definitely tell we have really strong numbers in terms of who comes into the building. And that is, in case you're curious, 36,000 visitors last year. But a lot of folks who have library cards are actually accessing the ebooks. And my last fun fact is that 96% of residents have library cards. Is that good? Yeah, 96.
Manchester.
Yeah, yeah. I know.
It's very
Impressive.
very impressive.
Yeah, but I guess, and then sort of the more like Wild West technology, you know, what are we doing about educating people about AI and things like that? I mean, that is another one that's evolving, and we're trying to get speakers in to deal with things like that. And we do have tech help sessions for people who want to sign up and learn more about things like that. But I mean, it's obviously going to be a big part of the future. And I think being a resource for the community to get educated, because it's all kind of compounding, because it's hard to even find the right information about these information tools. And frankly, that's like one thing that really keeps me up at night as a parent, because I think library services and literacy, all of that means all of this stuff. Like what are my kids going to think is like a fact? And all of that is just, it's going to be huge for all of us, what we need to learn, and then the generation coming up. So I think it's going to remain top of mind.
I think, yeah, yeah, totally. The last question that I'm going to ask is, as the community needs evolve, it has to do with facilities, by the way, and facilities have cropped up this entire discussion, so we're going to pick right back up on it. As the community needs evolve, so does the space and facility requirements, and that would be for any library in any town, but it's particularly true here. What's your perspective on the current state of the library's physical space? And would you advocate for any changes or improvements? That last part was probably unnecessary, but why don't you identify which improvements to the facility you would advocate for? And I hate to do this, but there's only two of you. Leslie, we're going to go back to you. I usually like to mix it up, but not this time. Leslie, why don't you take that up?
So as Sarah mentioned, I think the ADA compliant bathroom for sure is on the table already. Given the physical constraints of the building, it's been amazing how well things have become flexible. The Friends of the Library, I believe, Sarah, correct me if I'm wrong, paid for expandable and flexible bookshelves that are in the main area that can be pushed aside to create a meeting area, or where they can pull down a screen to show a movie or to have a lecture. Then they can be put back, and smaller desks and tables can be put behind them so that there still is some sort of meeting space or a tutoring area, or even as I do, I help process books back there. Excuse me. So I think that what the Friends of the Library especially has added to what and been able to add to the library has been very valuable. I don't think that there is a whole lot that we can change physically to the building as it stands right now. And as Sarah touched on, I mean, the extra funds that the library may have been going towards keeping the roof on, keeping the ceilings up, and keeping the water from coming in. So there's nothing that can't be done with some extra space, I don't think, and some great ideas.
Amen. Sarah, same question.
Sure. So obviously, I agree the building needs help, and I think of it in various stages. The the ADA compliance and being number one. And just to say it, when you make spaces more in line with ADA guidelines, it's going to take up more space. And for example, with the bathroom, without expanding the footprint of the building, which we're not going to do, obviously we have to take more space from somewhere else to have a larger bathroom, for example. So, starting with the ADA and then addressing, putting town dollars where we need to repair and maintain is sort of the boring part, but needs to be really the focus to make sure we don't lose anything. But then as far as the other challenges, it's pretty simple. We need more space. We need more programming space. We have no dedicated programming space. We don't have study rooms. If you're in there trying to have a discussion with a book group and there are teens in the loft and parents chasing children and even just trying to check out a book, I feel like the most frequent thing I say in the library is "excuse me," because I'm like, I can't even figure out where I'm supposed to go, or I'm like very embarrassed about my children just playing with a water fountain. And it's just like, it can feel chaotic because it's so small. And, I think some people, and I'm one of them, and there's some aspects about it that it is cozy, and I like that. And of course, we have a beautiful historic building designed by the same architect as the Boston Public Library. But we do need to find a way, and it's not going to be easy, to add space while maintaining that character and, again, making it obviously ADA compliant. And we know that that's not going to happen overnight, I would say, on the board. And some things that we've been working on is, in the meantime, being really opportunistic about programming space partnerships with other organizations in town. So we recently were able to secure space at Community Hall, as we're now calling it, at First Parish Church. It'll be every Tuesday, sort of during the non-summer months, for programming. And we think that'll be definitely additive, because we're limited now by what we can do in the building by the space we have. A lot of the events, especially the kids' events that I sign up for, require registration, and they do fill up. So, things like that are additive. We've worked with the Manchester Museum has some children's programming that we've tried to sort of work together on. We can use Crowell Chapel because that's Parks and Rec, but a lot of places that we do rent have fees, and it's just, it adds up. It's just something we constantly have to deal with. So I think that, I think I speak for the other trustees, but I certainly feel like I know it's going to be a long time before we have enough money. I mean, we do have some money for a capital project. I should say that. We do have a foundation. We'd have some money sort of in trust from donations that would be a good sort of seed source of money. But I think we have to be smart about what we can do in the meantime to help with the programming, because that is so important, especially when we don't have a community center. So I think that's one trend that I care a lot about, is just anytime we hear about an opportunity, making sure we're taking advantage of it.
Thank you. That was really fantastic. We're done with the questions. So I want to say thank you very much for being prepared and giving us a lot of excellent information to things. So, but I have one quick question that's not that as I've listened to the two of you, I just wanted to ask. It's a very specific question, and I don't know the answer, and you may not know the answer, and it's very specific, like I said. So don't worry. Is the fact that the library is not ADA compliant, does that bar you from being eligible to apply for any grants? I would imagine that might be an issue. I don't know.
I haven't seen it be an issue. I think we're sort of, I don't want to say forgiven by the age of the building, but I haven't, I'm sort of like looking at Dave and Rick covertly, but I have not heard of that being an issue for anything we've applied for. I mean, certainly there are ADA grants available, and we work with the ADA committee to try and get what we can, but there are other ADA needs in town too, even, and so.
Yeah, no, I'm just wondering if it prevents you from
Not that I know.
accessing money.
Sarah, the grant that was most recently applied
The state
for,
one.
did that ask?
It was certainly part of our rationale for what we needed, but the grant was very specific about things they expected to be sort of like maintenance and repair, or things the town should pay for and maintain on the flip side once they give you a new building. It was not intuitive, but and it was definitely a need, but I don't remember it being like a factor.
Interesting. Asked and answered. Thank you. Don't worry. I don't want to waste anybody's time. Okay, we're going to switch now to any audience questions. We're right on time. We've got plenty of time. I'll just say that because of this setup and this facility, I'm up here with you, and the audience is a little lower. So if you have a question, I can't run and give you a microphone, is what I'm saying. So just ask it. I'll repeat it, and then we'll answer it. That's how we'll do it, and that way it'll get captured for the video. So does anybody have any questions? Kathy Bellata.
Hi, thank you both for answering those questions. I have a question about the library's relationship with the school district. So I did not, raise my children in town here, so I'm curious as to what relationship might exist between the library and the various services of the school district, or if there were any opportunities maybe to expand that relationship.
So the question, just so that we capture it, is what is the relationship, if any, with the Manchester-Essex Regional School District? What is it, if any, and if there isn't any, is there interest in pursuing that? What's your thinking on that? So either one of you can start.
Sarah, do you know?
Yeah, I'll take it. I'll take this one. So informally, we're very connected to the school district and plugged in with the librarians, and they have, for example, like all the first graders go and get library cards and things like that you would think of. The library services in the school district have over the years been kind of low-hanging fruit for what to cut when needed, as I'm sure you followed. And I think that the library has done what it can, but the library also has a lot on its plate to begin with and not too many extra resources. So I think that's complicates things a little bit, but certainly there's a relationship with the teens in particular. They have a teen advisory board, and but that's sort of more like town-wide. And I know for the middle high school where we are today, they don't have a full-time librarian. And so they have formed a task force to talk about addressing the issue, and that it is open to the community, but we have a trustee that attends as well as our library director. So I think we're also, we're strong advocates and try to support them, but we also believe on a sort of a standalone basis that we need to do better in the schools in terms of library services. I'm hopeful this year. I think the only thing on the chopping block, if we had to go to the cuts budget, if it fails this last step in Essex, was a library assistant position in the elementary school. And I had to ask about what this meant. But currently they do have Samantha Seilig as the full-time librarian, but she travels between Manchester and Essex. So she has an assistant that keeps the lights on at the other library. So when she's in Manchester, someone's in Essex and vice versa. So if we were to lose that position, for example, the library would be closed like every other day for one elementary school, and the teachers couldn't come in and do projects, and Samantha would have to do all of the cataloging and the displays and all of this by herself. And so I think the biggest role we play now is trying to really support each other and be advocates. There's not a lot of formal interaction.
Leslie, would you like to add
I have
something?
a little bit more to add to that. At least from what I remember, the public library was supplementing as far as research. They'd always pretty much know, okay, this teacher assigns this project towards the end of the year, let's be ready. But then also, I seem to remember, and not quite as recently, but maybe I've just missed it, the big summer reading program and incentives that the school used to put out for other students to keep them reading over the summer. And I remember how much preparation the library would make for that. So I think, in answer to your question, Catherine, I think there is a lot of support between the two, but the way that Sarah described it, it was more informal than shake hands.
I would just like to add quickly that when we're taping this, Essex has not gone to vote in the election next week, which is the 12th. But the override did pass in the annual town meeting on Monday night. And it passed overwhelmingly, but there's a big difference between a 457 person annual town meeting and a 2,900 registered voter count in Essex, so keep that in mind. Ann Harrison, I saw your hand go up. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I had Kathy's question.
Oh,
I was going to be a lot more specific about what the library did when the schools decided that they couldn't afford, or that to restructure the library in the middle high school into basically a study hall.
okay.
Was that an opportunity for the library to step up and work more closely with teachers? Or how was it handled and how would you have handled it?
So the question, just to repeat it for, is when funding was cut at the middle school level in the public school system, middle high school program, and essentially turned into a study hall, what was, how did you react and how would you have reacted?
Well, I personally wasn't involved, or even, I don't know, it was sort of before my time, I'll say generally, when that happened. I think, though, in talking to our library director and staff about this task force, the view is that the public library doesn't really have the resources to step in and solve what's going on there. I mean, obviously, ideally, we would have our own librarian at the middle high school, but even in ways that would be worthwhile, I guess I should say it would, in a way that would be worthwhile, would require more resources than the public library has, just given everything that the staff there is trying to accomplish, serving the needs of, the children's reading circle to senior technology education. So I think it does seem like an area to explore ways to support each other, especially when we do have that vacuum at the middle high school. But from what I've understood, historically it's been a challenge because they just don't have the resources. And I don't know how much anymore. I mean, certainly like when I was in high school, I would take my research projects to the library. I don't think that kind of thing really happens anymore, if I had to guess it. But
So let me, if I can add to that, Sarah. So it's not just the resources within our own library that get used, remember? And I think you've all used interlibrary loan. So if there were some problems getting the resources at the school, I don't think the library per se would have a problem with that. I think that given enough advance warning that they would be able to bring in more books, say. As far as the technology, it would just be a matter of making sure that each student understood how to use the different databases, which databases to use, how to ask the questions that whose answers they're looking for. I don't think that would be the end of the world for if indeed the school couldn't provide what each student needed.
Thank you. Any other questions? Lynn?
Leslie Shane here, I'm on the Friends Board. With the funding cuts maybe with the state and all the databases which are instrumental in keeping the high school, middle school open without collection development on the book level, but the databases do. Do you foresee those funds from the Mass Board of Library Commissioners drying up?
for the databases specifically.
Yeah, I mean, mostly databases, but all the other things that the Mass Board of Library Commissioners provides.
That was a very inside question. So I'm going to ask the library trustees to repeat your question instead of me as they answer it.
I think it was a question about the databases that are supported by public funds, whether those are at risk of not being available if there's more defunding. I admittedly don't know the answer to that. I think a lot of these questions, although I do think, by the way, this is a good opportunity to talk about sort of what the librarians do and what the trustees do in terms of it kind of, I don't want to say how in the weeds we go, because certainly funding something as major as the databases or the ebook platforms would be, if there was a deficiency or those services couldn't be provided anymore, that would be a big deal, and the trustees would certainly be involved in addressing it. But I don't know exactly about that, because we sort of get postings at a higher level and not maybe the direct like play-by-play of what exactly could be impacted. But I do get some of the MBLC emails, and a lot of it is, it's confusing and it evolves like every day because it doesn't make any sense, right? So, you know, I think they are doing their best as far as like seeing what's coming, that they know they're gonna have to work with less money, right? And they know that a lot of the grants they're gonna apply for, if they're even there in the future, are gonna have strings attached to it that are not consistent with the way that public libraries are used to operating in terms of, you know, DEI or other things. I mean, the government has the right to attach strings to their grants, and so even if the funds are there, who knows if public libraries are actually going to feel comfortable making those grants. So that's probably not that responsive to your question, but I just wanted to sort of break it down into the types of things that the trustees think about on these topics.
So I wanted to, again, Sarah, thank you for letting me use you as your launch pad. EBSCO, which is a great company in Ipswich, whose owner lives in Manchester. If push came to shove, I'm sure that we could ask if the state didn't provide the funds for us to be able to get into databases. EBSCO, I'm sure, would come to the rescue. They have so many resources, so many ways of attracting students to answer questions, not just because they have to as an assignment, but to answer anything in where they go down a rabbit hole, anything that they might be curious about. So I wouldn't just depend, I guess, on state resources and state funds. I think that librarians are creative, and their staff are creative to come up with lots of ways to answer all of those things.
Great. We're running out of time, and I know that at least two people wanted to ask questions. So, Lindsay, did you have a question?
Yeah, I'm Lindsay Banks. Ms. Beatty, you had mentioned at the beginning that you were hoping to expand the library to a 5-person board rather than a 3-person board, and I was wondering what your understanding was of that process and the mechanism that it would take to make that happen. It sounds like in a perfect world we have both of you on. You both seem lovely, right? But we have a 3-person board as of now. How long would that take? What is the process?
So the question was about governance, and it was to Leslie. I'm just going to repeat it for 1623. It's what is the process to expand? You had mentioned in the beginning that you sought to expand the board from a 3-person board to a 5-person board. And Lindsay is asking, what is the process to make that happen? And what would you, how long would it take, et cetera?
So the way that I would imagine it is putting it to a vote at the library trustee board level first. And if they were to say, yes, let's expand it, interestingly, the state regs have it that you have to expand in multiples of 3. So that would mean 3 more people, talented people, that are interested in libraries and seeing where they can go in the next 10 or 15 years or however long. So we'd start at 3, and then once the library trustee board voted, hopefully, to agree to expand, then I believe it would go to the select board for them to appoint the other 3. But, and they would open it up to people who express interest in that position, and from those people expressing interest, they would appoint the 3 more people.
That's great.
Does that make sense? Okay.
I think we just have time.
Oh, could I just add one more thing?
Of
to that?
course, of course.
That is right. It could be done just by the current board passing resolutions, and then the vacancy would be appointed by the select board. I think one thing that I would like to see, and we've sort of started doing this, is the use of committees. We now have a building facilities committee, not sort of prospective looking at growth, but just managing what is the live project of the day and where is it in the bidding and all of that, who's following up with the town engineer. We have a grounds committee, because even that has its own challenges to make sure that the walkway and the trees and all that's taken care of appropriately. We now have the fundraising committee, which hasn't really taken off the ground, and that is going to be my role. But I think we have already sort of started changing the governance in that way, in a way that I think is helpful. I mean, we've talked about a lot of things that the library is facing and needs to do. I think it could probably be achieved by the proper committees. And we do have the Friends, and of course they play a specific role, very, very important role supporting the library in a lot of ways with the programming. And then I mentioned before, we do have a foundation that helps with managing the finances in a way that is a little more flexible because it's not directly tied to the town. So I guess my view would be there are also other ways to kind of divide the labor.
Okay. Well, unfortunately, we've run out of time. We've covered a lot of territory. The themes I heard were sort of this idea of creative connections, whether it's with other organizations, First Parish, museums, other libraries, the network, et cetera. Funding is obviously a theme through everything. And then facilities is the biggest. All roads lead to Rome. So thank you very much. I really appreciate it. We all appreciate it. And I would just like to say that, remind everybody that the election in Manchester is on Tuesday, May 20th, and it takes place, the polls open at 7 a.m. At Memorial School, so everybody should get out and vote. Thank you both very, very much.
Thank you.